in which he pretended to tell me about his religious beliefs. Well, obviously you didn't have any intent on finding the answers to these questions, because you're asking them demonstrates your willingness to believe what you want to believe. He says, I could vote for a devout Mormon for president, or anyone with any religious affiliation, if I agree with the candidate's policy positions. I used to agree with a lot of Romney's positions before he flip-flopped on all the ones I agreed with. Well, he changed his mind on the abortion issue. The whole gay marriage thing, gay marriage was never part of the gay rights that he advocated. And when he was advocating for gay rights, and just gay marriage wasn't considered in part of that fight at the time. So, these claims of flip-flopping are kind of exaggerated and lack any nuance. Again, nothing of this really has any semblance of him wanting to understand things, really. He has a set determination. He's trying to find the facts to prove what his set determination is of Mormons and Mitt Romney and everything. In 1890, the Mormon president claimed that he had a chat with God that finally convinced him polygamy was no longer cool. That's a major oversimplification. I was just reading the... in fact, you can go into our scriptures. It's actually in our scriptures, the things that he said. But the worst part of it is what he says here. He takes this quote by Brigham Young and he twists it horribly out of context. He says, when Brigham Young, a deadly serious racist, again, his presumption, and he pretends to have the capacity to judge people and take his false positions and determinations as to what things mean. And the hero of Romney's, who actually got mentioned in the speech, unlike the unmentionable Joseph Smith, was told Utah could not be admitted to the United States as long as it allowed polygamy. He said, quote, then we shall never be admitted. That's not what Brigham Young said. He did said, quote, then we shall never be admitted. But let me read you the whole amount as to what he said. I'm just going to pull it up here. Okay, so this is what Brigham Young actually said regarding polygamy in the state, or the United States, allowing us, or anyway. Okay, so I'm just going to review that again. So he says, that was quite a flip from, oh no, okay, he gets into this by talking about flip-flopping, and he claims that the Mormons flip-flopped on this. When Brigham Young, that was quite a flip from Brigham Young's anti-American position. When Brigham Young, a deadly serious racist and hero of Romney's, who actually got a mention in the speech, unlike the unmentionable Joseph Smith, was told Utah could not be admitted to the United States as long as it allowed polygamy, he said, then we shall never be admitted. Alright, now here's the actual context, and here's what Brigham Young actually said. Brigham Young said, I heard the revelation on polygamy, and I believed it with all my heart, and I know it is from God. I know that he revealed it from heaven. I know that it is true, and understand the bearings of it and why it is. Do you think we shall ever be admitted as a state into the Union without denying the principle of polygamy? This is a question he's posing. And then Brigham Young answers, he says, if we are not admitted until then, we shall never be admitted. Now look again at what he says. Do you think that we shall ever be admitted as a state into the Union without denying the principle of polygamy? Denying the principle. It says nothing about the practice. Brigham Young is very specific on saying the principle of polygamy. And our faith has never denied the principle of polygamy. It is in our scriptures. It's in the Doctrine and Covenants. And in fact, Brigham Young stated that if anybody who denies the principle of polygamy and continues to deny it eventually apostatize from the church, I believe that's true even for today. It's kind of akin to, I've pointed this out in some of my confrontations with traditional Christians, but you don't practice the Mosaic Law. But you can't really deny it and still claim that as your tradition that you came from. You can't deny animal sacrifice. You can't say it's not of God and then say that Christ is the one who fulfilled the law. It doesn't make any sense. Simply because you don't practice something doesn't mean you deny the principle of it. And again, that's the thing that Mr. O'Donnell really takes out. He says, then we shall never be admitted. He's claiming that as long as it allowed polygamy, and that's not what was said. It's as long if we were ever forced to renounce the principle we would never renounce the principle. There's nothing said about the practice. And he continues on, O'Donnell does. He says, in his Faith of My Father speech, Romney had the audacity to say, Americans tire of those who would jettison their beliefs even to gain the world. Weren't any of Romney's speechwriters worried that someone was going to point out that Romney's religion jettisoned its beliefs to gain statehood? Again, this is horrible assumptions. We didn't jettison the belief. Unless you believe Christians jettisoned Moses. They didn't jettison Moses. As Christ said, he didn't come to destroy the law. He came to fulfill the law. And it doesn't mean that there might not be some point in the future when it's practiced. Let's see, of course not. That would mean talking about a candidate's religion, which by present press convention only the candidate is allowed to do. The unprecedented relentlessness of Romney's flip-flopping is his campaign's biggest problem. The Mormon thing has done a fine job at diverting attention from the flip-flopping. No, actually, it's because there's not much flip-flopping there, really, within the context of his beliefs. He has changed his position in a few areas, but he's actually surprisingly consistent compared with your line-item vetoes of the Bible and the Catechism and what have you. Anyway, he finishes off here. He says, I, for one, am a libertarian on marriage. Well, that's great, because the way you end up going to describe it, marriage really isn't anything to you. It doesn't mean anything. There's no real purpose behind it. It's just some name you slap on any generic coupling that anyone would want to think of. So you can, Mr. O'Donnell, go off in your world of superficial labels. You can write off whatever you want to out of Catholicism. Then, if that's the way you see it, that's fine. But I do find it interesting that a person who assumes that there's always a lie in a speech, assumes there's always a deception being passed off. If the reason they assume that is because everything they say has some lie in it. And I believe that is true because it's demonstrable in your conversation about my faith. You've lied and slandered and done all sorts of horrible things of which you, in just the highest spirit of hypocrisy, go and try and lay at the feet of people who are really not hypocrites, especially not relative to yourself.